Okay, sorry about that. Just can't seem to get this thing going this morning. I thought I was going live, and now I'm just, it's getting a little flustering and frustrated, but hopefully now things are running. Hopefully you can hear me. So if you can see me, if you can hear me, go ahead and pop into the comments, or at least just say hi, and we'll go ahead and hopefully get rolling with this. So anyway, so welcome back to live stream journaling. I'm Eric Scott, and I'm trying to get this live stream rolling. So today I want to focus on some simple ideas for drawing in the journal. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times people shy away when they hear that word drawing, that it kind of scares them because they think like the only kind of drawing there is like really highly representational, very realistic looking drawing. And I kind of like to use techniques and tactics that are a little bit more accessible for anyone. And so some of these might seem a little bit simple, especially for those of you that really do get into that kind of representational and more realistic looking drawing. But for me, I think it's a little bit more fun, and like I said, it's a little bit more accessible for everyone. So let me go ahead and switch over and talk about what we are going to need. So as always, I've got my journal, and we're gonna just stick with some simple drawing material. So I've got some pens, I've got a pencil as well, and just going to use that and tackle some drawing in here. So I've already done some kind of drawing with folks. We've talked about drawing simple shapes like rectangles and circles. We talked about doing some stenciling with letters. Even tracing is another kind of form of drawing. But maybe you want to do something that's a bit more meaningful. So other, random lines are nice, but maybe you want to have something that's a little bit different or a little bit meatier. So that's kind of where we're gonna go today, is kind of talk about some simple ways that you can add to pages and build maybe some meaning, or build in some imagery. So I think what I'm going to start with is a simple technique. So I'm going to share like 3 or 4 different techniques that I find that I use a lot, that I turn to a lot, and hopefully you can get something out of them as well. And as always, kind of feel free to try them out yourself or change them up to kind of work for you. So any of these techniques are really good to use at any point in a page. So maybe this page is kind of empty. So I think what I'm going to do is start off with my pencil, and I want to do a technique that I just call a typography. So typography, if you think about that, that's the lay of the land, and we have topographic maps. So this is going to be reminiscent of a topographic map, and one of the reasons I'm doing it here is that pencil sometimes doesn't show up super well or super dark where there's a lot of material. So this is kind of empty, not a lot going on, so you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So if I'm thinking about typography, I'm thinking about like lines that represent like elevation. And so if you've ever seen a topography map or a topographic map, it uses shapes that kind of represent the different levels. And oftentimes I'll kind of start off with a little oval or circle. I don't know if you can see that. And then what I'll do is kind of do concentric shapes around it. Now, if I just did ovals, it wouldn't really look too much like topography, like land. So I kind of start to jut one part out a little bit, and then the other parts are kind of close together. And so what happens is where the lines are close together, that's where the hill, or in this case, maybe a mountain. So maybe this is the tip of the mountain, and so I can start to kind of do concentric shapes that are a little bit wavy, and then just go around it. And notice how, like right here, I'm keeping it close. That's going to make it look like the topography is steep there. Where the lines are further apart, that's going to mean like it's gradually kind of sloping down. So yeah, I'm just making up this topography. It's just something that I like to do. It's a nice texture. It's very organic. But the idea is to have kind of these concentric shapes. And then I can even have them go off the edge of the paper. So once it gets sort of big, then I can move on. And I like to do several of these. So maybe there's like, you know, a little one there, and then that comes out, and maybe there's another little tip there. And again, just this idea of concentric shapes that kind of get close and kind of far away. And it just starts to feel like a topographic map. I really like mapping images. You know, you've seen me use the maps in my collage and with my fodder, and I really like just using images, lines, shapes that kind of are reminiscent of maps, because I think maps really kind of help us, kind of tie us to a place, kind of help us orient ourselves into space. And so I see a comment there that somebody says that they love organic. Yeah, I do a lot of geometric shapes, and so this is kind of a nice contrast, a lot more organic, but it's still kind of, like I said, has that feel of maps. And one of the reasons I like to use pencil is that it's not super dark, and so I can easily layer on top of it. And sometimes the pencil marks get almost hidden by all the other stuff that's on top. So I could continue, maybe I can do some over here, but you know, you can kind of see, hopefully you can see that pencil and see how using that topographic kind of feel. So anyway, that's just something to kind of, one of the things to think about, one thing that you can try. And then the next one I want to try is, or show you, is a web imagery. And I don't think I have any examples in here yet. I haven't done it in this yet. The image that I used at the beginning of the live stream while I was trying to get stuff up was from another book. But you know, I developed this web imagery, and actually this is a photocopy. So a few people had asked about this. So this is a photocopy of some of that web imagery that I've done. And so maybe I want to do some, just trying to find a good spot for it. And it's something that I can do on pages that are already started, or maybe it's something that I want to do on pages that already have something on. So I'm thinking maybe right here. So I'm going to maybe do a little bit of this web imagery around these circles and kind of help tie in. So I can use any kind of pen or pencil. I'm going to use my, this is a Uniball pen. It's not a Vision pen. The store was out of red Uniball Vision pen, so this works really well too. It's very close to a Vision pen. So with the web, it's really kind of, it's a symbol of connection. It's an image of connection. So what I'll do is I'll just start off with some random lines. Sometimes I'll use maps. I actually developed an entire series of artworks based off of maps and this web. And so if you've ever seen my art online, or you've tuned into some of my live or my time-lapse videos, you might have seen this. So the idea is that I have these little thin lines. Now I go back and thicken them. So we talked about that before. And then where two lines connect, I round off the corners. And so the idea is that there's no sharp corners. So everything's kind of rounded off. And so where, you know, the four sharp corners where two lines meet get rounded off. And maybe a line goes up this way. I'll come back and thicken that. And this web imagery is, like I said, it's a symbol of connection. It's something that I developed I was just, for years, I was doodling it in my journal and kind of trying to figure out like, well, what's it about? And then one time I traced it back to a drawing of a tree, or actually a painting of a tree that I'd done. I was using red watercolor paint, and I painted a tree, and it reminded me of blood vessels. And so this web imagery really developed from that. And so this notion of like blood vessels or some kind of tissue, organic tissue, some kind of web. So it becomes very organic. But I was doodling it forever and really like trying to like figure out like what is this about? And what I discovered, or what I did, was I decided to start using maps. So sometimes I will do it with maps and either superimpose kind of maps on top of things, or draw lines that remind me of maps, kind of like roads. So if you kind of think about like, oh, if this were roads coming together, you know, you'd have a road maybe that goes across this way. And then again, I can thicken, maybe it goes off the top. And so I'm thickening the lines, and then anywhere there's a corner, I round it off. And what's really interesting is if you have sort of very geometric lines, you could do this with a grid, and all of a sudden it becomes a very organic looking kind of grid. But I try to be a little bit random with the lines. And so I don't know how well you can see that, but you can start to see that web imagery. And this is something that I can sit down and just do for hours. I'm not going to do that right now. You don't need to sit here and watch me draw this web imagery for hours and hours. But again, it's kind of thinking back to when I was talking about embellishments and how oftentimes it's just a way to focus my mind, or just to kind of have something to do without giving it a lot of attention or a lot of thought. Okay. Okay, this little brown paper up here is a piece of wax paper, so the ink isn't drawing on it too well. But that kind of hopefully starts to give you an idea. So again, it's just some like random lines, and then the one rule is that there's no sharp corners. You just round off each corner, and you can add as many lines as you want and connect spaces. And so what I did was I ended up superimposing lots of different maps of where I had lived into one drawing, and then went back with paint and painted all the lines and created this web imagery. And so it's really about it's kind of like mapping, and it's about like connection. So anyway, let me show you, let me pull out one of my other books. I'll show you the other image that I used. So this is just sitting down and doodling. You can just see all these random lines and creating all these little spaces. But again, there's no sharp corners. Yeah, maybe if you look, you might find one or two that I missed, but that kind of gives you an idea of if you just keep doing it, you know. And then I also did it back here with some blue and had it go more across the page. So that's just one of, you know, just another idea that you might try, another way to kind of fill up some of the space. Just something that I have used a lot in my own art. So that's just something to kind of think about. So another thing I want to share with you is drawing a face, and I'm not going to do a realistic face. I'm going to do a face. This is another image that has come up a lot in my art, and I've used it over and over again, and it's something that developed. I was just kind of doodling, and next thing I know, I was kind of like drawing these kind of not cartoony but more stylized faces, and I was like, oh, I like that. But what I did was I created kind of almost like a mask-like face. I'm just trying to find, I had a spot where I wanted to do that. Maybe it was back here. So again, I'm always like flipping through, oh, here's where I wanted to do it. And so I have my black pen, and I'm going to do this kind of mask-like face that I've been doing for a long time. And it's a pretty simple idea. You could do it lots of different ways, but the way I kind of do it is I always start off with the eyes, and I always draw it so it looks like it's a meditating or sleeping face. And if you've looked at some of my art, you may have seen kind of this type of face come up, and a lot of times I'll have it so it goes off of the page, so that's not completely on. So I'll try to do that. I'll try to draw it big enough, and so that way this face will kind of be the size of my page here. But you don't have to do a mask-like face. You can just do any kind of stylized or cartoony face. So what I do is I start off with the eye, and I just do that classic football shape. But I'm not trying to draw it realistically. I'm stylizing it, so I'm simplifying the way I do it. So a little football shape. And then I connect this eye, and I want another eye over here. And if you know anything about facial proportions, that there's basically one eye width between each eye. So if we measured that distance between one eye and another eye, it's going to be basically one eye width. So as long as it's about the same, it's going to look more proportional. Even though this is stylized, I don't really care if it's super proportional. And then I'm going to draw the other eye. And what I try to do is I try to draw it quickly, so that way I have to live with my mistakes. And I'm drawing this with pen, and I know some people are like, oh, I'd have to draw it with pencil first. I encourage you to draw with pen as much as you can, because what happens is you have to live with what you do. So anyway, so I've got the two eyes, and if I want them open, I can have the circles. If I want them closed, I can leave them like this, or I can draw a line through the center to kind of represent the eyes being closed. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of make the nose part. And so I'm going to come in a little bit. This is going to be a little bit thin. So this is kind of like the bridge of the nose. And so this is just going to go straight down. And I'm not worrying about it being a realistic proportion. So just two parallel lines that go down, and then, yeah, that's about far enough. And then just, I kind of do a rounded off rectangle, okay? And so that's going to be the nose. And then the mouth is going to be down here, but I'm going to come back up here to the eyes. Now what I like to do is I like to have almost a perfect circle, the kind of the best circle that I can draw very kind of quickly. Almost like they're big glasses. But again, this kind of goes back to that mask-like quality. I'm trying to do a mask. And of course, this side is going to go off the edge of the paper. If I want, I can extend a line this way as well. Kind of like doing that. Okay, so now I've got, this is going to be the eyebrow up here. So I can either do the eyebrow on top of the circle, or maybe I'll just do it inside of the circle. I'm just trying to smooth out. That's the thing with drawing with ink. It's like, oh, I didn't like how that circle worked out up there. So then do another one over here. Okay, so I got the eyebrows. Now I'm going to do this part of the nose. So I'm just going to do sort of little rectangular shapes. Again, kind of rounded off rectangular shapes. But this is just the way I'm doing it, so feel free to do it any way that you want. And then I like to think about the side of the nose, and what I'll do is like almost like a little triangle here. So I'll connect from here and just down to the side of the nose. And what I'm doing is I'm starting to build a face out of shapes. That's exactly what I'm doing, is building a shape or a face out of shapes. Okay, so this is going to be the side of the head. So this is, I can kind of go up. Let's see, go up and then around. So this is going to be the forehead. Maybe it comes in and catches the corner there. And then before I do the bottom, I want to go ahead and do the mouth. So a lot of times with the mouth, I'll just do a straight line. And again, this doesn't matter if it's technically, if we're doing facial proportions, the corners of our mouth line up with the center of our eyes. But again, this is kind of stylized, but you can kind of think about that, you know, if it's close to it. So that gives me a line. And then what I like to do is to connect kind of the top of the nose with the corner of the mouth. And this is what a lot of people call laugh lines. And then I can do the top of the lips, the top lips, upper lips. That's the word I was looking for. And this is a mask-like image. It's not stylized after, it's not styled after any kind of culture, but it does they tend to, oh, this is off a little bit. That's all right. That's a nice thing about art. You can be influenced by lots of different things. And then that little space above the mouth, you can kind of put that in there. And then the bottom lip. Okay. And then what I like to do is to do a circle for the chin underneath, and it's going to go right to the bottom of the page. And now that gives me the chin, so now I can connect the side of the head and come down and curve into the chin. Do the same kind of line over here. And then the ear tends to line up with the top of the head. So if I start here and go up, or not the top of the head, top of the eye, and then it usually lines up with the bottom of the nose. So I usually find that that's a pretty good way of doing the ear. And it doesn't have to be anything super special. And then just to do a couple lines in there to represent the ear. Let's see. And then a neck. I don't want the neck to be way over here. So if I come over a little bit, kind of go pretty straight up and down. Got a neck. Okay, so I have the basis of my face. So now I can start thinking about how I can divide it up even more. So a lot of times what I like to do is, let's continue this line down into the chin. Maybe I want to have a line that comes from underneath the eye over to the cheek and down, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Maybe I want to have sort of a crescent shape underneath the eye. Kind of mimics the eyebrows. I love to do a circle right here. I always think of the third eye in a lot of Eastern philosophies and stuff. They talk about, you know, your chakras, and that you have a third eye kind of here. It might be up a little bit more, but I just kind of like that. Like I said, it's not really based on any culture. This is just something that I've been doing. And then right above the eye, maybe do a curved line that comes up. So I'm just, again, dividing the mask up into these different shapes. And then what I do is I go back and I start to thicken lines. Especially, I like to have really thick around the outside of the face. So like I said, there's kind of like an African influence, but also kind of an Eastern influence. I always think about the Buddha statues that you see where Buddha is meditating and his eyes are closed. Maybe with the eyebrows, I want this to be a little bit thicker. So again, I'm just thickening my lines. And then the last thing I like to do is to add some patterns. And one of the things I'll just do is hatching lines, so little stripes. And this gives some direction. So by slanting them, it kind of makes it feel like the side of the nose is slanting. For the eyebrows, maybe I want to do a zigzag pattern, and because it's going over those other lines, it kind of helps tie it all together. Now to really make it look like this face has its eyes closed, I can kind of maybe put eyelashes down here, so sometimes I'll do a little zigzag, or another thing I like to do is just make this a little bit thicker down here. So if I make the bottom thicker, it just starts to, gives a little bit more weight, and it starts to feel like the eyes are closed. So maybe in this space I'm going to just do some long stripes that echo the curve of the side of the face, and then repeat it over here. So I'll spend more time on this, but this kind of starts to give you the idea of how this mask face kind of starts to come together. Maybe a few lines on the lip, especially the upper lip, to give it a little bit of shadow. Maybe divide that up. So again, it's just really just a matter of, you know, dividing and doodling and filling in with patterns. And that's kind of a mask shape, just a face shape that I've been using for quite some while. So just something else that you might want to try. And so there's one more technique, one more idea that I want to share with you all, and that is drawing people, but again, not worrying so much about a realistic person. And I get my influence from two sources. So the first one is this book called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And this is something that I read that helped me make the decision to leave teaching, because I think teaching is a giant hairball. And anyway, this is by Gordon McKenzie, who was an artist for Hallmark cards. And he talks about how, like, a corporation is a hairball, and as an artist, you know, like he learned to orbit this big kind of bureaucratic corporation. But what I love about this book is that it's full of these like little illustrations, and they're very reminiscent of kids' drawings, and that's one of the things that I really liked about them. Especially, this is a good page here. So I really like how he like drew these very simple kind of kid illustrations. And then another person I've gotten into here lately is Linda Berry, and this is her book Making Comics. And I've been really getting into it, and she talks about drawing comics, and a lot of people freak out because, oh, I can't draw or whatever. And so she talks about a very specific idea right here on this page. So cartoonist Ivanbrunetti, and down here he's got like this very simple process for drawing kind of cartoons or characters. And so I kind of adopted both of them as I kind of draw characters. And so that's how I kind of think of it, not drawing people, but kind of drawing characters. And teaching elementary school kids, I loved the whimsy of little kid drawings, because they draw with such kind of creative courage. I've used that term a lot, but it's a good way to kind of start incorporating you know, images that aren't found or super realistic. So maybe again, I always flip through and kind of think about like, oh, where do I want that to be? So maybe I'm gonna do that more back here, maybe where there's some other stuff going on. Okay, so here's a good page that I've got some space on. And so the idea, the steps of this Ivanbrunetti is to start off with like two basic shapes. So you could do circles, ovals. A lot of times with heads, I will do kind of a U shape and then flatten the top, especially for like a boy kind of figure. You know, just a nice head shape. It's almost an oval. And then I love doing spiky hair, almost like a crown. Okay, so then another simple shape for the body. If I want to, I can do a neck, but I think for him, I'm just going to do just a real simple shape coming out. And then I can think about limbs. Limbs don't have to be anything spectacular. They can just be, simple, curvy shapes. Okay, maybe this guy's got his hands up. And then thinking about hands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just by drawing quickly and not getting so caught up in like, oh, it's got to be perfect, Actually, that guy's only got 4 fingers, so I can always give him another one on the side there. So then thinking about legs can easily just come down. Maybe just some simple shoes. So very basic, and some people are like, oh, well, that's so like, like a little kid. It's like, well, what's wrong with drawing like a little kid? It takes off a lot of pressure, and it's actually a lot more fun. It's one of the reasons I don't do a lot of realistic drawing anymore, is that trying to get caught up into drawing very realistically can get really frustrating. And I just find that sometimes this is a more authentic way of drawing, because it's more about spontaneity. It's more playful. And so, for details, little pointy nose because he's in profile, got an ear, got an eye. But one of the things I like to do is give him some details. This is something that little kids tend not to do. They just, it's like, you wear clothes that have stripes on them or patterns. It's like, why don't you draw characters with that? So you can really draw different kind of patterns on them. Okay. So I've been getting into these kind of characters, and I always like to put them into interesting scenarios. So maybe like there's a little house next to this guy, and then the question becomes, is the house in the background, or is this guy a giant? So that's something to kind of have fun with. And there's kind of nothing wrong with this. It's like, some people sort of like, oh, well, when I draw, it's got to be very realistic. It's got to be, very representational. But, again, drawing with my pen. I didn't pick up a pencil to try to draw it perfectly. So that's something to kind of think about. But yeah, so those are some kind of techniques that you might want to try. So maybe you're going to try to do some kind of characters or kind of cartoony comic kind of things, maybe stylized faces. Let's find my other ones. Typographic kind of marks. And then my last one was, if I can find it again, near the front, my web. So, those are just some very basic ideas. They're not super sophisticated, but I think they're fun, and it's an easy way to add to your journal. It's an easy way to draw, and it's something, like I said, it doesn't have to be this like super grand, like, oh, I'm going to draw realistic. Like, hey, I'm not saying don't do observational drawing, don't do representational, but I think so many people get caught up in like, oh, it's got to be a perfect thing. It's got to be this amazing kind of thing. It's got to be super realistic and super representational. And I think what it does, it scares people. And so I think this is an easy way to start drawing, and maybe in a way that's not so scary, that it's just, here's some simple ideas that you too can draw. Drawing does not have to be about just highly representational, very realistic kind of drawing. It doesn't have to be that way, but too often I think we do sort of feel that. So anyway, that's kind of wrapping it up for this episode. My plan is to be here Mondays and Wednesdays, so I'll be back here next Monday at same time, 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And I'm not really sure what I'm going to focus on. I'm kind of starting to run out of ideas, maybe not. Maybe I have to just kind of get a little bit creative. But so you can tune in next week. But then also later today, if you haven't gotten enough, I'm doing a virtual meetup. And so doing that through Zoom, if I know some of you, I see your names and in the comments, and I know that some of you have emailed me or messaged me about it. So if you want to be part of it, I'm going to email, because it's through Zoom. And if you're not familiar, Zoom's been getting bombed lately with people that pop into uninvited to meetings and such, and are doing some nasty stuff. So I'll be sending out a link and a password. So you need that to join, and I will only send that directly to people, so please don't share it with anyone. If you want to invite people, direct them to the Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter posts that are out there, and I'll be happy to invite them. Right now it looks like it's going to be like 20-25 people, and the idea is that we're just going to hang out. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Again, if you have any kind of questions, any kind of comments, pop them into the comments. I usually sit down afterwards and try to respond to them. So thanks so much, and we'll catch you hopefully later today. If not, then next week.